Okay, listen up. Today, we're going to build what feels to me like maybe the equivalent of a CIA operative in D&D. At first glance, they're clean-cut, charming, and stalwart defenders of justice, but take a closer look and you realize that they are willing to do whatever it takes to defend their ideals, even if that means engaging in a little undercover espionage. Oh, and also, they hit so hard and so reliably that they might as well be a heat-seeking missile. Welcome to D4. Hey everybody, so here at D4, each week I take a deep dive into a specific character build for my favorite role-playing games. I like to crunch numbers about them, I like to theorycraft about them, not so that I can tell you the definitive right way or best way to play a character, but to explore one potential way to build something in the hopes of creating a character that's both really fun, but also really powerful to play. So if you enjoy creating characters for your favorite role-playing games almost as much as you enjoy playing the game itself, or if you're just looking for tips or ideas on how to build something you're thinking about playing, or if you just love theory crafting, then welcome home. This is where you belong, and I'm so glad you're here, so thank you for watching. My name's Colby. Right, so when I first read the 2024 Player's Handbook subclasses, you know which one immediately stood out to me as the character I wanted to play next in a campaign? No, not Monk. No, not a Blade Singer even. They don't exist in the 2024 Player's Handbook, but it looks like we might be getting one soon. See here for details and thoughts. It was actually the Devotion Paladin. I am a big sucker for Pallies. They're sort of my second favorite class in games where you can play them. My alt in World of Warcraft was a Tankadin Paladin. My second playthrough in Baldur's Gate 3 was mostly a Paladin. There's just something to me about the archetype of a strong, tanky, protect myself and others while putting the hammer down character that I love. Yeah, when I took the What Order of Knight Radiant Are You quiz, I was a Windrunner, for you Brandon Sanderson fans out there. And yeah, Thor is, my favorite Marvel superhero, but I think that might have something also to do with my Swedish heritage. Anyways, maybe I'm a little basic, but that's who I am. The main reason that the Devotion Pally stood out to me was the fantastic change to their Sacred Weapon Channel Divinity option, mostly, which we'll get into. But also, I've got to admit, when I realized how smiting in the game had changed so drastically in 2024, only being allowed once per turn, and most troubling of all, in my opinion, now costing our bonus action, my excitement about Devotion Paladins dwindled significantly. But after mulling it over for the last few months and doing a build around smiting that you can see there, I think my initial fears have ebbed somewhat. First of all, as a result of the changes, the other non-divine smite spells have become a lot more appealing, and we got more of them, and some of them got buffed, and playing with them looks fun and powerful. Secondly, if we can only smite once per turn and it takes our bonus action, well, it sort of lets us both assume that we can smite kind of more consistently, right, throughout a combat encounter, probably adding to our overall sustained damage in a build, and also saves us from having to worry about taking feats to weaponize our bonus action so much if we're building for damage, meaning we essentially just have a built-in weaponized bonus action. And we can thus put our efforts into making our attack action attacks better and use our feats on other things, etc., etc. So that is what we're going to build today. A mostly Devotion Paladin who hits like a truck, smites liberally, but who is also great at protecting themselves and their allies. So I'm excited to present D&D episode number 202, the Lockeden Bard 2.0, the Ordained Operative, the Pledgehammer, Übersäuende Vorschlaghammer, the Sludge of Allegiance, that one's awesome, the Agent of Devotion, Judge Dredd, the Templar, Speak Softly and Carry a Big Stick. I loved all of these and more. Big thanks to my channel members for their suggestions in the Discord channel, but I think my favorite this time was from user Rad1228, the Knight of Whispers. Sounds intriguing and mysterious. Huge thanks to my good friend Randall Hampton for the fantastic artwork that he put together for the build today. I mean, this is awesome, right? Look at that smirk. That guy knows things. He's got secrets, right? Anyways, if you'd be interested in following Randall to see the other art that he produces, or to maybe even try and commission him to create some art for your character or even your entire party, I'll put links in the video description as always on how to do so. And guess what? No sponsor for the video today, which is, I mean, it's great for you guys, I guess. It's kind of crappy for me, but that's okay. Let's just jump right in. So at level 1 for our starting class, I do want to do a little multi-classing on the build today, but I think it's important that we start Paladin, primarily because if we multi-class into Paladin later, we don't get heavy armor proficiency, right? And we're going to want heavy armor proficiency on this character for sure. Plus, again, I think that conceptually, this character is like a Paladin first and foremost, and so I like starting there for our character's story arc. For our species, I think I'm going to say let's go elf, and as usual when I go elf, this is primarily to have access to the elven accuracy feat anytime I'm going to be attacking with something other than strength. And if I will have a reliable source of advantage, which I will here, I like to get elven accuracy if I can. It's just so good. That said, if you can't play with both 2024 and 2014 material, or if you're just sick of elves, or you really want to be a different species, that's totally fine, and you should do that. It's not a huge deal, and the truth is that this character is going to have such a high hit chance that elven accuracy isn't going to do as much for us as it does for a lot of other builds. Still, it will make some difference to our hit chance, especially at higher enemy ACs, and it's kind of the thing that I love most about the build, as you'll see as we get into it. And maybe more importantly, on a build that can smite, the greatly increased crit chance from elven accuracy is super fun and potent. So that's what I would do. Plus, I really love elves. As I've already established, I'm basic. As far as the subspecies of elf here, pick your favorite, right? I love high elves for the spells and the wizard cantrip, but actually, if I could use stuff from earlier books, I'd probably go Shadar Kai or Eladrin for the extra teleporting plus other goodies, but any elf really will work here. For our background, I'm going to say, take an old one or a custom one if you can, but if you can't, Merchant would probably be my preferred option, as it gives, I think, my favorite origin feat here, plus the ability score increases that I want. As for the origin feat, I would want to grab Lucky, I think. This lets us proficiency bonus times per day, have advantage on any D20 test, or give an enemy disadvantage on an attack against us. It's just universally useful and something I like to have to guarantee advantage on a first attack, especially when we're hopefully setting up advantage on subsequent attacks like we will be on the build here. For our starting ability scores, I assume we go the point buy method as always and say let's start with a 15 charisma and take a +2 there, a 15 constitution and a +1, and then a 15 strength, meaning we dump everything else. And yeah, we will be favoring charisma today to be a more sad version of a paladin, a single ability score dependent, which is awesome, but unfortunately we will still need a relatively high strength to multi-class out of Pally, as well as a prerequisite for a feat that we want, and also, in order to wear heavy armor without suffering a penalty to our speed. Kind of a bummer. I would have loved to be even more sad, but it's okay. Our initiative will suffer dumping dex, right? And like wisdom saving throws and perception checks. We will get some stuff to kind of mollify those things a little bit, but yeah, it is kind of a bummer. You might have wanted to take alert as an origin feat instead of lucky to really kind of help you out with your initiative, among other things, right? Could be a better overall choice in the long run, depending on what else your party's doing. But for starting equipment, we are going to go with chainmail, and then I'm going to say either a maul or a great axe for a weapon. I'm a little torn. I do want to build a big 2-weapon user here for like maximum damage potential, though you could make a sword and board build work just fine if you prefer a little more tankiness. But yeah, which big weapon to choose? I think greatsword is probably the weakest option for us, since the weapon mastery for it, Graze, does a little damage when you miss a target, and we're like never going to miss our target. I think the maul is my favorite weapon for this build conceptually. I just love the idea of a huge hammer wielding paladin. You are the judge, right? Plus, the maul's 2d6 is a little better damage than the great axe's 1d12 on average, though is a very small difference. And the topple weapon mastery on the maul is really good, but as I've said, we will have a pretty reliable source of damage otherwise if we want it, and so with that in mind, I think the great axe might be as good as or better than the maul, depending on the level that you're at here, since yes, at Paladin 1 we do get weapon masteries, right? And the great axe's mastery, Cleave, lets us make an additional attack against a second target once on our turn if we hit one enemy and there's a second enemy standing next to them, right? Situationally, it'll be more total damage, potentially, and cleaving is just fun. Plus, a pally with a great axe? Not a common look, but one I love. Anyways, if you decide to go with the Maul here instead, it has the Topple Mastery, yes, which lets you force an enemy to make a Constitution save every time you hit them with it, and then if they fail, they're prone, right? No size restriction on this mastery, but Constitution save, so that's a bit of a bummer. That said, I'm not necessarily going to be relying on Topple for advantage. It will probably help us out sometimes and maybe lets me make some assumptions a little more comfortably than I might otherwise make. So yeah, it's kind of a nice like sort of backup plan for advantage, I suppose. And you know, if it works and we can topple our enemy, making them prone, giving us advantage on attacks, right? If we're within 5 feet of them, then we won't need to do the other thing that I say we're going to be doing in order to get advantage, and that could save us resources or let us spend them on something better. Anyways, I'm going to assume that we're using them all when I crunch numbers. Either option's great. As a Pally 1, we also get Lay on Hands, which gives us a number of Lay on Hands points equal to 5 times our Paladin level that we can use as a bonus action now, nice, to touch someone, including ourselves. Stop touching yourself. To heal them for 1 hit point per point spent, or spending 5 points to cure the poisoned condition. Wonderful support feature, and it scales really nicely. Finally, at Paladin 1, we get Paladin spells now, right? Instead of having to wait till level 2, that's awesome. And I think the standout spell options here are Bless, of course, to buff multiple party members with an extra D4 to all of their attacks and saves if you want to spend an action and your concentration on it. I think if no one else in the party were doing this, I probably would most of the time. It's such a great spell. When I crunch numbers, I'm not going to be making that assumption. But yeah, your party will really benefit from this spell. So consider using it if no one else is or can. Cure Wounds is a nice option to have if you're out of Lay on Hands points. I'd probably want Divine Favor to add a D4 of damage to all of my attacks. Bonus action to cast, and doesn't even require concentration, nor require you to use a bonus action to transfer it to a different target or anything. Ranger says, excuse me? Poor Rangers. And then I think I'd also grab Searing Smite here. I'll probably do a proper build around Searing Smite one day. That day is not today, but it's a good Smite option. It does less damage on the initial hit than just vanilla Divine Smite. It's only an extra 1d6 of fire damage on the initial hit, requiring your bonus action when you hit, just like all Smite spells now. But then they take another 1d6 of fire damage at the beginning of their turn, so 2d6 total, and then they make a Constitution save, and if they fail, they continue burning, meaning another 1d6 on their next turn, rinse, repeat. Best of all of the damage now scales when you upcast it, both the initial and the burning damage, which is great. That said, sometimes you just want to know that your enemy is dead, right? Like doing slightly less damage to hopefully have them keel over on their turn by using Searing Smite instead of Divine Smite to get all of your damage now, 2d8 right away, leaves the enemy alive potentially to like maybe use their reaction, also maybe to soak up resources of your ally who is going to be attacking them on their turn to make sure they're dead, etc., etc. Also, a Constitution save to end the burning condition, right, means that a lot of enemies, maybe most, will have a pretty decent chance of ending the spell after 1 round. I don't know, I have mixed feelings. I will use it once we can start upcasting because 4d6 guaranteed damage from it as a 2nd level spell is better than 3d8 total damage as a 2nd level Divine Smite, right? If only just. But it does scale at a better rate. Really quick, before moving on, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to my channel members. You guys are amazing. I could not do this without you. Thank you so much for your support. If you're not a channel member, I still think you're amazing. But I would also love it if you'd consider joining. There's a little button down there that says join. Click on it. It just tells you the benefits that you can get by being a member. And I give all of like the perks that I have available to all of my members that are like silver or above. So it's like $2 or more, right? I just ask that you pay what you think it's worth and what you feel like you can afford. Those perks include access to the library of write-ups that I do for all of my builds so that you can recreate it yourself a little more easily if you want. Access to the community Discord server filled with so many wonderful, engaging people, and access to the monthly live Q&A hangout sessions that we do. If you can't or don't want to be a member, that's okay. I'm glad you're here watching, liking, subscribing, clicking the notifications bell, commenting, etc., etc., etc. So thanks for doing those things too. But at level 2, I think it's time to take a dip into, yes, Warlock. You don't have to do this, but It's the thing that will let us be more sad. Pallies get so much from having a good charisma score, and if we can make charisma our attack stat as well, it lets us pump charisma with our feats and lets us benefit from elven accuracy, so it's the route that I want to go. You'll be fine if you decide to avoid making a deal with an otherworldly being. My question is, why is this paladin, preparing to swear an oath to uphold the ideals of justice and order, making a pact here, and with whom? As we've talked about plenty of times on this channel, the pact doesn't have to be with an evil being, right? You don't have to be making a deal with the devil here, though you could, and that could be interesting as well. I think for me, my character here would be approached ideally by like an envoy of some otherworldly being that represents law and order. That could be a deity, or it could be like a celestial empyrean maybe, or something like it. This otherworldly being has seen our fervor, our commitment, our devotion, yes, and has decided that they would like to aid our cause, lend us some of their power if we will follow their advice or counsel or instruction perhaps. But maybe here too we're laying the groundwork for developments in the future. I'm thinking that for this paladin in particular, they're like not so much interested in upholding and promoting a religion or a church. They're more like an agent of the law of the land. And while that often might mean being a soldier called to serve king and country, queen and country, they might be willing to get involved in a little shadow work if that is what will serve the ideals of law and order. So maybe they're more like, yeah, a CIA agent or a 00, right, in Her Majesty's Secret Service. That's how I like to think of them, at least. Anyways, at Warlock 1, we get invocations now, or one invocation at least, and it's the main reason we're here because that means we can take Pact of the Blade, which is just fantastic. It says that, as a bonus action, we can just conjure a simple or martial melee weapon of our choice that we are bonded with, so now you can pick the weapon based on what you think you might need for, like, this fight, right? Of course, later, if you get a magic weapon, no worries, you can bond it, and either way, when you attack with your bonded weapon, you can use your charisma modifier for the attack and damage rolls instead of strength or dexterity, so great, and you can cause the weapon to deal necrotic, psychic, or radiant damage instead, if you want, instead of its usual damage. And looking at the new monster manual, that is actually also kind of huge depending on what you're fighting. I love it. So yes, from here on, we can just focus on bumping our charisma, and everything we do will benefit as a result. Awesome. We do get warlock spells here too, of course, and I would focus on getting stuff that paladins don't get, and there's a lot. Eldritch Blast or Toll the Dead will be a nice ranged option, which we're currently kind of lacking. Armor of Agathis is a nice defensive temporary hit point buff that can return damage to a melee attacker. Hideous Laughter is a nice single target control option if you need one, and I would seriously consider the Bane spell here as well. Chris, Treant Monk, did a great video recently on the way that in the new 2024 rules, Bless is maybe not quite as good as it used to be and how Bane is maybe just a little bit better than it used to be. Watch it here if you haven't. I like the idea of having both, personally, and while, sure, Bane still allows for an enemy save, and so isn't just an auto success like Bless is, right? It is a charisma save, which is nice, meaning that most enemies will probably be failing it, and subtracting a d4 from all of potentially multiple enemies' attacks and saves is super powerful. Now more than ever, since even martials are going to be forcing a lot of enemy saves, right? Case in point, the topple weapon mastery that we're likely using. Anyways, at level 3, we have got our most important feature from Warlock, and as much as I'd love to have 2 spell slots that reset on a short rest and 2 more invocations for that matter, I think we go back to Paladin. We need extra attack and Aura of Protection and our subclass and more, so we will be a Pally 2 here, meaning we get a fighting style, first off, and I mean, sure, in the interest of increasing our damage as much as we can, I'll assume that we're taking the Great Weapon Fighting style, which now just says that if we roll a 1 or a 2 for our weapons damage rolls, specifically and only, rules as written, I guess you can argue about that in the comments if you want to, but then those numbers count as a 3 instead, and while that's better on a Maul than it is on most weapons since we're rolling 2d6, right, it's still not awesome. It's less than 1 damage more per hit on average, so if you'd rather go with like the defense fighting style to increase your AC, or interception to help your allies stay safe, or even blind fighting to let you like not worry about fighting in magical darkness, or if your enemy is otherwise heavily obscured, then go for it. All of those options are good ones. We also, at this level, get the new Paladins Smite feature, which just says that we always have Divine Smite prepared, which is one reason why I didn't say to take it at level 1, and that we can cast it once per day without spending a spell slot. Okay. Cool. I'd still rather have it not cost my bonus action over getting a free casting of it once per day, but I'm not going to get Wizards of the Coast to change their minds by whining about it all of the time, so let's move on. At level 4, we would be a Paladin 3. That means, first of all, we get Channel Divinity, right? This works similarly to how it works for Clerics. Twice per day and then once more per short rest, we can use our Channel Divinity to do a couple of different things. All Paladins get Divine Sense that basically lets us detect celestials and fiends and undead that are nearby, right? But then we also can do something with it as per our subclass. And yeah, we get our subclass here too. And of course, as I've said, we are going to go with the Oath of Devotion. And as a Devotion Pally, we get the Sacred Weapon feature that says, when we make an attack, we can just decide to burn a use of our Channel Divinity as part of the attack now. We don't have to use any resources to turn it on otherwise. And doing so lets us add our charisma modifier to our hit chance with that weapon for 10 minutes. And that is just so awesome. And it makes me so happy. And I love it with all of my heart. Also, when we hit with it, we can cause the weapon to do its normal damage type or radiant damage, though we could already do that with Pact of the Blade. And then also the weapon sheds bright light in a 20-foot radius and then dim light for 20 more feet beyond that. I love that we can use Channel Divinity twice per day now and then recover one use of it with a short rest, meaning we can really, I think, pretty much assume that we'll have this available for just about every fight, except for at the most hardcore tables or hardcore adventuring days. As for the Oath spells that we get as a Devotion Paladin, we get Protection from Evil and Good and Shield of Faith, both situationally useful, requiring our concentration, but good defensive options. At level 5, we would be a Paladin 4, and that means we get our first general feat. And yeah, I think we should take Elven Accuracy here, but if you wanted to take Great Weapon Master instead, I wouldn't blame you. The damage increase between the two is very close, actually. If Great Weapon Master gave us a Charisma bump option like Elven Accuracy does, then it would actually have a slight advantage. But since Great Weapon Master increases our strength or dexterity instead, in the end, it ends up giving us better damage at lower enemy armor classes, with Elven Accuracy giving us better average damage at higher enemy armor classes, though the total average between AC 10 to AC 25 is almost identical for the feats. Thus, since I'd say we're more likely to fight, say, a 17 or 18 armor class at this level than we are a 10 armor class, at most tables at least, I think, I'd just as soon go with Elven Accuracy, especially since it will also let us crit more often, which is always fun if we're smiting, and will improve our other Paladin features, spellcasting, our Aura of Protection soon, etc. So yeah, for those who don't know, Elven Accuracy lets us bump, for us, our Charisma by 1, and then says that when we make attacks with, not our strength, right, and we have advantage, then we can basically roll 3 d20s to try and hit instead of 2 d20s. It's fantastic, but if you can't use old content at your table or don't want to, go ahead and grab Great Weapon Master here instead, I would say. And of course, I guess I should mention, if you're not going to get Great Weapon Master until well into Tier 2 of play, you'd be perfectly justified to go Sword and Shield with this build if you wanted, right? If you were using a D8 weapon, whether a longsword or a battle axe or warhammer, etc., and took the dueling feat for your fighting style, your damage output would be almost as good as a Maul user with the Great Weapon fighting style. But of course, you'd have the massive benefit of the extra armor class from your shield. So feel free to go that route if you want. I think it's probably what I'd do if I were playing this character in game, if I knew that the campaign were going to end before level 9 at least. Remember, while fighters get the ability to swap out their fighting style feat when they gain a fighter level, that versatility is unique to fighters. Paladins and Rangers don't get that same ability to swap out fighting style. So once you pick a fighting style, you gotta stick to it. Unless you want to burn a feat later to get a new one, and that's really expensive. Of course, taking dueling instead of the Great Weapon fighting style isn't actually going to hurt our damage all that much when we're using heavy weapons, so maybe you just take dueling anyways. Give yourself the option. Okay, moving on. At level 6, we would be a Paladin 5, and that means we get extra attack so that we can make 2 attacks when we take the attack action now, and that's wonderful. And then we also now get the new Faithful Steed feature, which just says that we always have the Find Steed spell prepared and can cast it once per day without spending a spell slot. Just keep in mind, For those who used to get attacks from their found steed and enjoy the benefit of using them like they were a controlled mount, the spell has changed pretty significantly, and I find it really difficult personally to interpret it now as anything other than, hey, you got a free controlled mount that's going to give you some nice extra movement, right? The mount probably isn't going to be making attacks on your turn, unless you're incapacitated. I mean, I suppose maybe if you don't use it as a mount at all, I can see some people saying that it can work like just like a summoned creature and make attacks and things, but it seems fairly clear to me that in combat, the intent here is to have it just be a controlled mount unless you're incapacitated. We also get second level Paladin spells here, and Devotion Pallies get the very nice Aid spell for free, giving increased max hit points to several party members as well as healing them, and also Zone of Truth for free, which can have some really nice utility. Other than that, I think I would grab Lesser Restoration for a little cure-all. Warding Bond is one of my favorite tanking spells if you want to lean into that role, increasing the armor class and saving throws of an ally by 1, then like splitting the damage with you anytime they get hurt, right? But the one I especially want to highlight here is Shining Smite. This is a new Smite spell in 2024 and is one of my favorites. Like all Smite spells, you cast it as a bonus action when you hit an enemy with a melee weapon or unarmed strike, and then it does an extra 2d6 radiant damage, but then essentially puts a fairy fire-like effect on the enemy, though they don't get to save against it, which is amazing. It lasts for 1 minute and it causes all attacks against that enemy to have advantage, and also prevents them from going invisible and causes them to shed bright light. Now, there are some drawbacks to using this Smite. It does less damage than Divine Smite, for one, 2d6 as a second level spell compared to Divine Smite's 3d8 as a second level spell, or Searing Smite's 4d6 total for that matter, after 1 round, right? But free automatic advantage is pretty dang powerful, especially for those of us with Elven accuracy, right? Of course, if you're using a Maul, you might not necessarily need that advantage if you can knock the enemy prone, but the enemy might make their Constitution save against being knocked prone with your Maul, so maybe especially on high con save targets, this is a nice way to give advantage for both you and your allies, albeit at the cost of your concentration, the other drawback, right? And slightly less damage on the Smite itself. For now, I'm going to assume that we're using it, though later on I might make a switch. Okay, now that we are level 6, let's do our first damage report. As far as tactics go, things are fairly straightforward for us here. Let's assume that on round 1, you run up to your enemy, you swing at them with your Maul, turning on Sacred Weapon as you do so, and using a luck point to get advantage. Assuming you hit, which you almost assuredly will with EA's triple advantage and Sacred Weapon on, right? Apply Shining Smite on them for an extra 2d6 damage. I mean, if you want, go ahead and try to knock them prone first with your Maul, and then if they succeed on their save, hit them with Shining Smite to guarantee advantage for your next attack. I'll assume for ease of math here that we're using Shining Smite on round 1, though there will be times when you don't necessarily need it, in which case, cool, I'm actually underselling this thing. Anyways, yes, at that point we make our second attack with advantage, right? And then on round 2, I'll assume that we've got advantage thanks to Shining Smite, meaning that if you knocked them prone instead and they stood up on their turn, if you didn't use Shining Smite or your first target died and now you're moving on to a second one, then you won't have advantage. You might have to use another luck point or something, so maybe I'm overselling it now. Hopefully it balances out a bit on the average. Anyways, at that point, we would be making 2 attacks again on round 2, but this time, before we even attack, instead of smiting, I'm going to say let's use our bonus action to cast Divine Favor on ourselves. This is by no means a no-brainer. Giving up a smite for more damage now to get a little more total damage over the next 3 rounds might look good on the spreadsheet, but it might not be the best call tactically, right? If you crit, you're going to wish you'd saved that bonus action. If your target is left alive with just a couple of hit points, you're going to wish you'd used Smite for your bonus action instead. But I can't know that. And I'm just working in a vacuum here, so sure, since it'll give us more total damage potential, I'll say we're using Divine Favor on round 2. On round 3, things will look the same for us, but for our bonus action Smite, let's assume we're using Searing Smite since we have 1 more second level spell slot, right? We use the first one on Shining Smite. This is going to give us, I'm going to assume, a total of 4d6 damage. There is potential for more than that if they fail their save on their turn and they live long enough, but let's just say 4d6. We're only going to take an average over 4 rounds here anyways, right? Finally, on round 4, you'll make your 2 attacks, but just use a first level Divine Smite as a bonus action instead, whether that's with your free once per day use of it, or because you're burning a first level spell slot, for 2d8 more damage on a hit. Did I say this was fairly straightforward? My bad. And just FYI, with Sacred Weapon turned on and a +4 to our Charisma modifier and using Pact of the Blade, our hit chance is a +11. And we're level 6. That's not even assuming we've got a magical weapon, which we probably have. Oh, and we're probably rolling 3d20s to try and hit most of the time. I love it. So anyways, averaged over 4 rounds, the damage that we would do against an enemy with a 10 armor class here would be 42 damage per round, and against a 15 AC, it would be 42 damage per round. And yeah, this is something we're going to see a lot throughout this build, yeah? Probably the flattest line of damage of any build that I've ever done, maybe. Coupling an insanely high hit chance from Sacred Weapon with Elven Accuracy means that the damage will stay almost the same regardless of what the enemy armor class is, at least until we start getting into the very high armor classes. And even then, it will be very good compared to most builds. At this level, compared to other DPR builds that I've done to date, check the video description for links to the spreadsheets and graphs where you can see these comparisons. We're kind of middle of the pack tier 1 now versus low enemy ACs, but once you get to an enemy AC of 16 and above, we're beating out everything I've done for 2024 so far at this level. And that means this is probably our hardest hitter yet, right? At level 6 anyways. Since you're so much more likely to be fighting an enemy of like 15 or 16 armor class or higher at this point than you are at 10 or 11. All right, this feels awesome and potent, and we can heal and tank a bit and bless potentially. And I mean, heck, we haven't even gotten to our aura of protection, which we will get at next level, right? Level 7, we'd be a Paladin 6, and this feature is arguably the Paladin's best feature, right? Granting you and all of your allies within 10 feet of you a bonus to all saving throws equal to your Charisma modifier, and that's amazing. Though, keep in mind that it did get a bit of a nerf in 2024 in that it doesn't work if you're incapacitated, meaning that if you get stunned or something, it just like shuts off until you're recapacitated. That's okay, it's still amazing, and it makes me not feel quite so bad for not getting Warcaster or like Constitution saving throw proficiency, among other things. At level 8, some would argue that we should jump ship from Paladin to start taking levels in a full Charisma-based caster, or sure, go back to Warlock to level Warlock spells, get more invocations, pick up Eldritch Smite, right, etc. Doing this, multi-classing here, would help scale the power of our smites, among other things. It's not a terrible idea. But now that we can't smite on every attack, this is a less powerful thing to do than it used to be, I think. And hey, maybe that's good for the health of the game. Less of our total damage is coming from smites now, and there are some really good Paladin features if we just stay pally, including damage bumps. So I think we have to stay the course here, at least for a while. That means, yeah, we'd be a Paladin 7, and as a Devotion Paladin, we get the really nice Aura of Devotion, which buffs our Aura of Protection to also give immunity to the Charmed condition. And man, that's really awesome. Keep in mind that a lot of things cause the Charmed condition, right? Not just like the Charmed spell, but Hypnotic Pattern, Dominate Person. So this can save you and your friends from some really nasty control features that an enemy might be trying to throw your way. At level 9, we would be a Paladin 8, and that means we get another feat, and yeah, I do think we should probably take Great Weapon Master here if we didn't earlier, bumping our strength to 16. It's a half feat, right? And that doesn't help us a ton, but I mean, hey, strength saving throws, I suppose. Athletics checks. I'd love to cap my charisma instead. I would, but we don't really need more charisma to help us hit. It would help a little, sure, depending on the enemy AC, but I mean, we're gonna hit. So bumping charisma would only add 1 more damage to our attacks, really, give or take. Sure, it would also increase the effectiveness of our Aura of Protection as well as our spell save DC, among other things, but if we're going for like damage overall, Great Weapon Master is the way to go here, as it would increase the damage we do when we hit with a heavy weapon, specifically now during attacks made with our action only. That's okay, we're using our bonus action for smites and spells, and the damage is equal to our proficiency bonus. It would also let us make a bonus action attack with that weapon if we were to crit or reduce an enemy to 0 hit points, but I'm just going to assume that we're smiting still. To be fair, if you're deciding between using a first level smite to add 2d8 damage or just like use that bonus action to make an attack that would do 2d6 for the weapon plus 4 for our charisma, then sure, just make the attack. But now that we're getting into higher level spell slots, I'll assume that we're smiting because I always assume that we've got all of our resources available during a fight. Make a different choice if and when it makes sense for you. But this brings us to our next damage report. Since last check, we have added 4 more damage now to each of our weapon attacks, thanks to Great Weapon Master, picked up another 2nd level spell slot for bigger smites, potentially, and grabbed some fantastic defensive and support features. But our tactics have essentially stayed the same. So, against enemies with a 10 armor class, we would now do 52 damage per round on average, and against a 16 AC, it would be 52 damage per round on average. Again, averaged over a 4-round combat encounter. This is so great. So it's not a huge increase percentage-wise to our total DPR, right? It's decent. And compared to other DPR builds that I've done to date, this kind of puts us in the middle of tier 1 again, where we're sort of at the lower end against low AC targets, but beating out most others as the enemy AC increases. And now we are a way better tank and support character as well. Living our best devoted life. At level 10, we would be a Pally 9, and that means we get the new feature, Abjure Foes, which is, again, quite potent. It's similar to, like, Turn Undead that clerics get. It's a little less powerful, but it works on charisma modifier number of creatures. Any creatures that we can see within 60 feet, at least. If they fail their wisdom save, they are frightened for a minute, or until they take damage, and during that time, they can only move or take an action, or take a bonus action. It's a super solid debuff that your allies will love you for using. And then we get 3rd level Paladin spells, and Devotion Pallies get Beacon of Hope to really buff your healing if you want to use it, as well as Dispel Magic, always handy. But in addition to that, you've got some really great options here. Aura of Vitality is a fantastically efficient healing spell, especially between combat encounters, I think, unless you want to concentrate on it during the fight. Revivify is super useful to bring a downed ally back from death, and if you haven't been following coverage of the new monster manual very closely, yeah, monsters are deadlier than ever, and dying is easier than ever. So I'd say a couple of your party members should be packing Revivify or, a better resurrection spell if you can manage it. But the 2 I really want to highlight here are Blinding Smite and Ye Old Spirit Shroud. Blinding Smite is awesome. It does 3d8 radiant damage when you hit as a bonus action, and then automatically blinds your enemy, meaning that all of your attacks, yes, are made with advantage, and all of theirs are made with disadvantage, unless of course they have blindside or something. Best of all, it doesn't require concentration. So good. Now, unfortunately, they do get to make a Constitution saving throw at the end of each of their turns to try and end the blinded condition, but hey, you're getting at least 1 round out of this, and it hits a little harder than Shining Smite, and best of all, doesn't require concentration. So I am going to assume that we're using this on round 1 going forward. I figure between this, Topple, and our luck points, we should still be able to have advantage on our attacks most of the time, all of the time sometimes, right? Though it might mean burning a spell slot for Shining Smite on later rounds instead of, say, Searing Smite or Divine Smite if we need to keep advantage going. This then leads us to what we could potentially be using our concentration for now if we wanted, and yeah, boring old Spirit Shroud. Sorry, I still love this spell. Even though we live in a world where Conjure Minor Elementals exists, most tables, I think, are banning Conjure Minor Elementals, at least as it exists in the 2024 rules right now. So regardless, I think Spirit Shroud is still a solid option. It takes a bonus action to cast, requires concentration, and then causes your attacks made against enemies within 10 feet of you to take an extra d8 of radiant, necrotic, or cold damage. Hooray for damage type options now more than ever. And also prevents them from healing, and has their move speed reduced by 10 feet until your next turn. The damage here for the spell does scale, but only every 2 spell levels, so it goes up to 2d8 per hit as a 5th level spell, right? At level 11, we would be a Paladin 10, and all Paladins get Aura of Courage at this level, which further buffs our Aura of Protection to now grant immunity to Frightened as well. So we've got a buff to all saving throws and immunity to Charmed and Frightened with our Aura of Protection. We are incredible, seriously. I only wish that we could get our aura to be a little bit bigger. I still think that the size of it should scale incrementally with Paladin levels instead of just going from 10 feet at level 6 to 30 feet at level 18, but bleh. At level 12, we would be a Pally 11, and I really wanted to stay in Paladin at least to this point for both the defensive goodies and because at this level we get the nice little Radiant Strikes feature, which simply adds another d8 of radiant damage to all of our melee weapon or unarmed strike attacks. It's not a huge damage increase. It would be better if we were making more attacks than we are, but it's not nothing, and I'm happy to have it. At level 13, I am tempted to multi-class now, but the spreadsheet says we should cap our charisma, and in this case, I don't think the spreadsheet's wrong, because we get so much more than damage with a charisma bump, right? So as a Pally 12, we get a feat. Let's just go ahead and increase our charisma to cap it at 20. Bringing us then to our next damage report. Since last check, we have increased our charisma modifier by 1, making everything we do better, added a d8 to our weapon attacks from radiant strikes, and picked up 3rd level spells and spell slots for blinding smite and spirit shroud for another d8 to all of our attacks. The difficult question, though, now kind of becomes, when do we use Spirit Shroud and when do we use Blinding Smite? Curse all of these things that I need my bonus action for. Let's do this. Since we've got 5 luck points now and a maxed out charisma modifier, I'll assume that on round 1 we're casting Spirit Shroud to get that going and hoping that our topple works. Remember, the DC the enemy is rolling against isn't based on our strength necessarily. It's the ability modifier used to make the attack roll, which feels particularly kind of Wizards of the Coast to give us. And even if the enemy succeeds on the save against topple, we can burn 1 more luck point for advantage if we really wanted to on that second attack on round 1, right? On round 2 then, let's go ahead and Blinding Smite to give us advantage, hopefully for multiple rounds, but again, we can still try to topple and use luck points. On round 3 though, I don't think we're using Divine Favor anymore. At least not if the combat is going to only last 4 rounds. 2d4 extra damage per turn, potentially, right, with 2 attacks, when that might only mean 4d4 total damage over a couple of rounds, just isn't as good as the 4d6 or 3d8 we could be spending on smites, right, with our bonus action. If we were pretty sure that the encounter was going to last more than 4 rounds, then sure, go for it, use Divine Favor, but I'm assuming that we're using Searing Smite on round 3 and Divine Smite on round 4, both at the 2nd level. Oh, and we're a plus 15 to hit now, by the way, without magic weapons. Lols. Anyways, over 4 rounds, on average, against an enemy with a 10 armor class, we would do 77 damage per round now, and against a 17 armor class, it would be 77 damage per round. So silly. And yeah, even against a 25 enemy armor class, we only dropped to 72. That's incredible. So similar to every other damage report thus far, compared to other DPR builds that I've done to date, we're kind of bottom of tier 1 versus low enemy AC here and beating almost all of them at high enemy AC. But we are almost a full paladin and bringing all kinds of fantastic support with us along with our damage in a way that is just stunning, frankly. So where do we go from here? Well, at level 14, I think it's time to take some bard levels. Of course you could stay Pally, Restoring Touch, Smite of Protection, an oath feature, right? And 4th and later 5th level paladin spells are all great reasons to just stay the course. That said, the increases that we would get from more paladin levels are almost all defensive, supportive, or control-ive in nature. So if we're truly wanting to maximize damage output, not saying we should, but if we did, then yeah, we would want to go with a full charisma-based caster here, I think, and while sure, we could also go back to Warlock and get more invocations and subclass features and better spell slots that come back to us on a short rest, if we truly wanted to get the most damage, going Sorcerer or Bard would be better, since that would let us scale the damage from our smites more quickly, since we combine our levels with Paladin in that case to determine what spell slots we have, right? And while yes, I think Sorcerers bring a lot of potential to the build here, Sorkadins are super popular, metamagic is awesome, etc. For this build, I think I prefer the Bard. Bardadins need more love. And that then, yeah, kind of makes this build a Lockadin Bard 2.0, doesn't it? One of the first burst damage builds I ever did. Check it out up there. And also the inspiration for the character I played for almost 2 years in a campaign that we recorded for the Tales of Veneria channel. Ceradon. Such a great character. But anyways, the real question we need to be asking here is, why is this Devotion Paladin taking Bard levels now? Well, kind of like I said at the beginning, this particular Paladin, being devoted to the ideals of law and order, isn't above using subtlety and subterfuge to protect their ideals and those who represent them. They are incredibly charismatic, and sometimes maybe that means using their charm to tell stories about themselves and others, to extract information, go undercover, gather intelligence, or even threaten or extort. To them, the end justifies the means, but yes, whatever your reasons, we are taking Bard levels here, making us a Bard 1, and that means we get Bardic Inspiration, which lets us, Charisma modifier times per day, use a bonus action to inspire an ally, letting them roll our Bardic Inspiration die, a d6 for now, to add to a failed d20 test, that's nice, anytime in the next hour now, so some nice buffs for Bardic Inspiration. We also get Bard spells, and I'd probably focus on grabbing stuff you didn't have access to before. Vicious Mockery to debuff and hurt with an insult. Dissonant Whispers to hurt an enemy and force them to run away, potentially, yes, prompting opportunity attacks. Featherfall is a nice to have if you get pushed off a cliff, right? Healing Word for a bonus action heal option now. And sure, Silvery Barbs, if the mob will let you get away with it. Anyways, none of these spells we're going to necessarily plan on using for damage here, so pick your favorites. Don't forget that thanks to multiclassing, we'd now have a 4th level spell slot for bigger smites if we wanted. At level 15, we would be a Bard 2, meaning that we get expertise, letting us double our proficiency bonus in 2 of our skills that we're proficient in, and I'm just going to say PYF again here, pick your favorites, but would probably want to go personally Perception and then maybe Persuasion, considering our role here. Maybe even like Persuasion and Intimidation or Deception if you're really like being the party face and you want to lean into your CIA operative role here. We also get Jack of all trades, which lets us add half of our proficiency bonus rounded down to an ability check we make that uses a skill proficiency we lack, should come in handy once in a while. At level 16, we would be a Bard 3, and that means we get our Bard subclass. And while I've mostly been focusing on using subclasses from the 2024 Player's Handbook only for the last few months, I think you'll probably start to see that change a little bit here going forward. There are still plenty in the 2024 Player's Handbook that I do want to build around and use, and I think those subclasses will continue to get most of my attention, but sometimes you just gotta pull out an old favorite, right? Because I love Whispers Bards. They are my favorite Bard subclass, and they're so juicy and so flavorful, especially when paired with a Paladin. This kind of juxtaposition makes for some fun character development, I think. Anyways, feel free to go another route if you want, and for that matter, maybe especially if you can't use old subclasses, I would seriously consider going Sorcerer instead of Bard for the goodies that you could pick up there instead. But as for me, yes, we are going College of Whispers, and I'm not sorry. Whispers Bards get 2 features here. Words of Terror is a fun utility ability. That's fun to say. Francisco. That says if we speak to a humanoid, specifically, wish it could be any creature, but oh well, for 1 minute, then we can force a wisdom save or cause them to be frightened of us or any creature of our choice, and they're frightened for an hour, or until they or an ally of theirs is attacked or damaged. Some potential fun and usefulness there for sure. But the real reason we are here, of course, is for the Psychic Blades feature, which says that once per turn, when we hit with a weapon attack, we can spend a use of our Bardic Inspiration to deal an extra 2d6 psychic damage to the target. So here's hoping that our allies weren't counting on us giving them inspiration, because we are going to be selfish bastards with that resource. Hey, they're getting a lot from us already. Bumps to saving throws, immunity to frightened and charmed, even some occasional heals. Don't feel bad about doing something for yourself here. We also get 2nd level Bard spells now, and again, I'm just going to say PYF. Lots of good options. Nothing I would plan on using in combat necessarily. So pick the stuff that's going to help you, get some better utility and support. We do get a 5th level spell slot here as well now, thanks to multiclassing, meaning we could upcast Spirit Shroud to do 2d8 damage per hit if we wanted. That's nice. But then finally for us, at level 17, we would be a Bard 4, meaning we get another feat, right? And yeah, I wish we could have gotten to Bard 5 by the end of the build for bigger inspirations that reset on a short rest instead of a long rest, and for 3d6 Psychic Blades damage, but alas, I really wanted that ability score increase at 13, so c'est la vie. I'm happy to get another feat here now, though. I kind of think we should take something to bolster our saves or defenses otherwise. Heavy Armor Master wouldn't be the worst, but it feels less good at this level than it did at low levels. I think I'd probably end up taking either Resilient Constitution or Resilient Wisdom. Probably Resilient Constitution, since we have immunity to fear and charm, and those 2 things tend to cover a lot of like the things that we would need a good wisdom save 4, right? But it doesn't cover everything. And we've got a solid constitution, better than our wisdom score anyways, for sure. Warcaster wouldn't be a bad choice either, but maybe you think we should take something else instead. If so, let me know in the comments what you think it should be. Sentinel? That'd be nice. Mage Slayer? Lots of great options for sure. This then brings us to our final damage report. Since last check, we've added 2 5th level spell slots, 3 4th level spell slots, 2d6 more damage from Psychic Blades once per turn, and a healthy heaping of support and utility options as well. Let's assume that we are upcasting Spirit Shroud for 2d8 damage per hit using our other 5th level spell slot for Searing Smite, because screw it, why not? It would do a very nice 10d6 of damage total, right? Potentially more. And then using Blinding Smite and Divine Smite at the 4th level on rounds 2 and 4 respectively. If you wanted to blow most of your spell resources on a single combat encounter, which I'm not saying you should do, but as always, I like to explore what's possible, and I know that most of you are only having 1 or 2 combat encounters per day on most days. So I think doing this is a useful exercise. Anyways, on average, over 4 rounds, against enemies with a 10 armor class here, we would do 112 DPR. And against enemies with an 18 armor class, we would do 112 DPR. And you know what? I think this might be the first time I've ever done a build where the DPR versus a 10 AC was always the same as the DPR for the more middling AC, isn't it? Maybe for builds like the Thornlock or the Grappling Bard, that might have been the case as well. I might need to confirm that, look at the spreadsheets. But regardless, this is freaking awesome. We've blown well past the century mark for damage, even against enemies with a 25 AC, and I love that so much. Compared to other DPR builds that I've done to date, that puts us pretty much in the exact same place we've been all along, though admittedly those overpowered Conjure Minor Elementals using builds do keep a solid lead against us, even at the highest enemy ACs now. No one else really comes close though. So let's kind of bring it on home with some final thoughts here. The tier score for this character, if you take the damage they do against every armor class over each of the 4 damage reports, just average it all into one big number, we end up with a 69. Nice. But while sure, 69 puts us kind of in the middle of tier 1, which is a fantastic place to be. Again, this is just an average that accounts for armor classes from 10 to 25, right? If we were just looking at averages from, say, 15 to 20 or 15 to 22 or something that maybe feels a little more reasonable, we would be very near the top of the pack here. And I mean, yeah, longtime viewers of the channel know that if there's anything I love in D&D, it's reliability and consistency, right? I know, I am so exciting and adventurous. But this build, perhaps more than any other build that I've ever done, I think, brings so much reliability and consistency. Maybe the only one that might beat it out on that front would be the Nuclear Wizard build that I did. That one for Will Wheaton, I just kind of did amazing burst damage regardless of what numbers you rolled. But this one today is for sure at the top of the heap for sustained damage. There's no doubt in my mind, and that makes me love it so much. But you know what makes me love it even more? The fact that we bring just some really amazing, incredible support and utility with us to the table as well. Our aura is so strong. People are gonna wanna be closer to us than they would to Chris Hemsworth with his shirt off. Okay, fine, maybe not quite that good, but we are for sure a close second to Hemsworth, right? I mean, immunity to Charmed, immunity to Fear, a +6 to all saving throws, a solid AC, solid utility options, as well as a strong healing potential, and a +16 to hit with incredible damage. Sign me up. So yeah, sorry, Moon Druid. Your time at the top of the next to playlist was short-lived indeed, because this Paladin is for sure the new frontrunner for me. So I really hope that I get to play them very soon, and I hope you do too. But regardless, that's the build for the week. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you know that I love you, because I do, and you're awesome. Thank you guys so much for all that you do for me, for this channel. I hope you have a fantastic day and a really great week, and if you don't, please, 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 don't give up. Hang in there. I hope that you will do good and be kind, and that I see you again very soon. But until then, take care. Bye. love. I get so lost sometimes. Days pass, and this emptiness fills my heart. When I want to run away, I drive off in my car. But whichever way I go, I come back to the place you are. And all my instincts, they return, and the grand facade so soon will burn. Without a noise, without my pride, I reach out from the inside. In your eyes, the light, the heat. Somebody had said that in the Discord server that I needed to sing Sledgehammer by Peter Gabriel for the song today, which seemed thematically fitting, right? But I'm like, if I'm going to sing a Peter Gabriel song, it's got to be In Your Eyes, because it's like one of, if not the best love songs of all time, as many of you other children of the 80s know and appreciate. I'm wondering how many of you immediately started thinking of Say Anything, the movie, that was a song from. I mean, he didn't write it for the movie, but it was used in the soundtrack, right? That famous holding the ghetto blaster. Yeah, good show. All right, I'm going to need help. I need help from Google. How do I say that? Ubersekunder Forschungsfragen. Überzeugend.
Überzeugender Vorschlaghammer.
Überzeugende Vorschlaghammer. Überzeugende Vorschlaghammer. All right, let's try it. Überzeugender I can't say that. I mean, well, as well as for a feat, as well as a prerequisite. Come on, and wisdom and like wisdom spell saving throws. Sorry, we will get some things to mollify those things for chainmail, and then I will, and I'm going to wait for that plane to pass because it's loud. And this is a new Smite smell. Smite smell. Not Smite, the smells. And it makes me feel not quite so bad for, and it makes me feel, so doing, when it might only need the real reason we need being devoted, inspiration, what's let me, and those using our 5th level spell slot for solid utility options as well as a